Joined us. Okay. All right. So, hi again, everyone. Welcome to PMP Live. My name is Michelle, and I'm a bookseller with the Children and Teens Department. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so excited to celebrate the launch of Paradise on Fire, written by Jewell Parker Rhodes, who is joined in conversation by Jason Reynolds. We'll drop the link for purchasing the book into the chat box, so be sure to reserve your copy tonight. You can also get a signed book plate from Jewell while supplies last. You can also check out our website for other amazing books by both authors. And tonight, definitely want to mention that you can ask authors questions by clicking Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote on your favorite questions, and at the end, we'll have time to go over some together. As always, please remember this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that folks be respectful of one another and any questions and comments. Now, on to tonight's event. It is my pleasure to introduce the critically acclaimed and gracious and talented authors, Jewell Parker Rhodes and Jason Reynolds. Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes is an award-winning author and educator. Her works include Towers Falling, the celebrated Louisiana Girls Trilogy, and the New York Times bestsellers Black Brother, and Ghost Boys, which received over 30 awards and honors, including the Jane Addams Peace Award and Walter Dean Myers Award. The driving force behind all of Jewell's work is to inspire social justice, equity, and environmental stewardship. And that is so evident in her latest middle grade novel, Paradise on Fire. In it, we find Addie, obsessed with mazes and maps, traveling across the country to a wilderness skills camp alongside 5 other Black city kids. Both poignant and practical, it delivers teachable moments amidst a heart-pounding story. Jewell is joined tonight by Jason Reynolds, the 2020 to 21 National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. Jason's plan is to not write boring books, and he has succeeded. His New York Times bestselling track series begins with Ghost, which was a National Book Award finalist. Other award works include the critically acclaimed As Brave as You, All American Boys, and the Newbery Honor book, Long Way Down. And now I'm excited to turn it over to Jewell and Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle. And thank you, Jason. Hi, Jason. How are you?
So good. I'm good. It's good to be here with you. I'm very happy to be here to celebrate this. Another one from the great Jewell Parker Rhodes. I like to be Jewell. I have to tell you, I have to, whenever people come to these events, I like to make sure they know that we're grateful that they're here to support us, but also y'all gotta buy the book. That's just the reality. That's the business. You know what I mean? We get a little uncomfortable. We don't want to say it, but the truth is that it's 43 of y'all on here, and at least 40 of y'all need to buy the book, right? I have no shame. I feel like we got to be honest.
No, well, thank you very, very, very much. And it is true,
it's
pass
true.
The books along. And I remember once when I was talking to you earlier and you had all your books packed behind you. I have a lot of my books right now, but I actually also like to just give them all away. And so if you buy a book tonight and you're done reading it, give it away to somebody else or give it to a child and just spread the good things. I love books. Just love it.
Absolutely. We're going to get started with, and I asked you this before we got on, just to read a little bit, only because the book just came out and we have people here, and I can talk about the book because I've read it twice, but I can't talk too much about the book because I don't want to blow it for everyone who hasn't read it yet. So just give a little taste and then we'll get into the discussion.
All right, the little taste, and this is the opening of the book. Michelle gave a wonderful intro that explains the basis of the novel. So I'll begin. There's always a way out, Grandma Beebe whispers. Use your mind, your heart. Her arthritic fingers poke my chest. Closing my eyes, I smell her red bush tea, the shea butter she rubs on her skin. Her spirit is alive, urgent. But Grandma Beebe isn't here. Here is a packed airplane. The plane is leveling off, engines murmuring steadily. 2 bells. The seatbelt sign blinks off. We're flying high. I grab my pencil and notepad from my backpack and draw. I remember the flight attendant walking the aisle, pointing at emergency exit doors. I quickly sketch row after row. I block the front exit with an X. The closest exits are ahead of me. Row 18, exit on the left and the right. These are my escape doors. If the plane falls, drops to the sky, I need to rush from row 23 to row 18. I'm in the window seat. I need to get past the two kids sitting on my right. Should I go forward or back? If the aisle's packed, then what? Retreat to my seat? Cling, swing, window shade to safety? Climb over seats? What's the best path? I underline escape 3 times.
You know, I have so many questions and so little time, but first, let me say this. The one thing that struck me about this book was that I realized maybe after chapter 2 that I don't think I've ever read a book where, it's funny because I've written a book about city kids going to the South, right?
Yeah.
And to be amongst like Southern culture. But this is different. This is like city kids really going into the natural elements.
Yes.
In a very different way. And so I guess my first question is, I guess like, why? Like talk about this a little bit. I mean, I have my own, and here's the thing, I have all kinds, in my head, I have all sorts of answers to this question, but I want to hear like, what was the impetus of this to say like, look, what if we take the Brooklynites and the Bronx kids and the Queens kids, and we take these kids out of the city, out of the big city, and we plop them down in the middle of the natural environment. And it may not be their natural environment, but it is the natural environment.
Natural environment.
And what happens, you know?
Well, I actually have two answers.
Okay.
One is personal. I remember when I came to Seattle for my book tour for my very first novel, some 35 some years ago. And it was like, what? I've never seen a place that looked like this. The mountains, snow-capped even in the summertime, the ocean, the lakes and the harbors. And I just fell in love with it. I've always been looking for a landscape where it called to my soul, and I found it. And then about 20 years later, you know, my husband came up here. He says, yeah, I could live there. And now actually it's year 2. We now live in Seattle and we're making our retirement home here. Though I'm never going to retire. I'm always going to keep writing. But anyway, but it just calls to my soul. And I just thought how many of us, by not traveling, you know, we don't find that landscape that we're meant to be a part of, that has a spiritual connection. And I've been all over the world, you know, Brazil, you know, Portugal, Spain, China, Norway, just all kinds of places. And yet this is my home space. So I might never have left that Pittsburgh Steel City place if I hadn't become a book writer and traveled. The other thing, I was at a Jackson Hole, Wyoming conference on writing, and I visited them like 3 times. And when you go there, everybody in the audience and all the writers to be are pretty much all white, you know, and that's cool. And one night I was talking, it was about Ghost Boys, and in the back row was a whole row of these Black kids. And it was like, whoa, I got to go talk to them. And they were part of City Kids Wilderness Adventures. So there's a program in DC that takes 6th graders, and all the way through high school, they do activities with them, experiential learning. They send them out to Wyoming in the summers. They take them, on rafting, horseback riding trips, and basically it transforms their lives. So the idea that you could find through experiential learning, you could find in nature something to give you back that sense, or to add to that sense of resilience and strength. That really impressed me. So the book is also in honor of them. And I gotta say that I have always loved survival stories, you know, and also, especially bad B movies, survival stories. but very often they're about young white boys. You know, there are a few girls, but not very many. So I just love the idea that a young girl, she would be the one who didn't know that there was a landscape waiting for her that was hers to claim, and that she had special strengths that she would never have maybe discovered in the same way had she stayed, say, in the Bronx or stayed in Philly, that she literally claims her whole self in a new way and claims her attachment to our natural world.
She's so amazing. I think, I think about where my special space is, because I agree with you that, like, see, I mean, I'm a Washingtonian, by the way, who has not even heard it. Yeah, and I don't even know about this organization. Now I'm like, let me go look these people up, But my sort of spiritual base, though, whenever I feel spiritually energized, it's actually in Arizona, right? And so, like I'm like a sucker for the Southwest.
Wow.
I go twice a year, and I just go out into the desert, and I hole up in some resort or I got like a little special place I go, and I sit up in the Camelback Mountains, and it just does it for me. Some people have to go to, like, the water.
Yes.
But for me, it's the desert,
It's really funny, Jason. I wish I had known that, because, I'm still teaching for Arizona State University, but from up here. But I raised my kids in Arizona, so I know all the ins and outs of Arizona. And I got to tell you, the whole time I was there, in terms of living there, I loved the bowl of the blue sky. I just loved it. And I love the mountains, but I am not a desert person. I would love to meet you sometime and take you to some of my favorite spots in Arizona. But there's also this idea of the West, and the whole migration of Black folks. We focus sometimes from south to north, and we also forget about the westward migration. And actually, my husband and I intentionally moved west to escape prejudice. And of course, we discovered that no matter where you go, you still be Black. And, we were smack dab in Los Angeles when, Rodney King was battered and had the LA riots. And, it just goes on and on and on. Sure. But having said that, there is a different sensibility with the West, and there are different glorious things to see, different ways of being and how people move through their landscapes. Like out here in Seattle, it's like everybody's, pretty much like really casual hiking boots. Can you hike and go do stuff? And in the Southwest, that independence and riding a horse. Have you ridden a horse in Arizona?
Not in Arizona, no.
Then that's what we're gonna do, a trail ride.
I'm gonna do it.
A trail ride. And also I recommend a hot air balloon over Arizona. Okay. So I'll come down and do that with you. But there's just these different feelings that you get from these Western landscapes that you don't get, say, in Baltimore, where my son just finished his schooling. He is now a master's of nursing. Ooh, yay, Evan. But Baltimore, sometimes I just felt as though wouldn't it be great if I could just lift all those kids and say, for a minute, let's go visit Arizona. Let's go visit Seattle. Let's go visit California. Let's go visit Hawaii. Yeah. And what that would do to their soul and their spirit, knowing that those landscapes exist.
I mean, I think about, I have a house in South Carolina, in very rural South Carolina. I have a home down there on a couple 100 acres of land. And when I was young, I inherited it. And when I was younger, I hated to go there. And the older I got, the more sort of like the intrinsic parts of me started to reach out for that place. And in the book you write about, like, she is having these they're not premonitions, but she's having these sort of callings from her grandmother, from Bibi, right? And Bibi is sort of, affirming her in all these ways. And it made me think about how I often wonder, especially for Black folks specifically, if there are parts of, especially for city Black folks, if there are parts of us that are always calling us back to the land, right? Like I think about this all the time, and all the various sort of iterations of the land, right? But I often wonder if there are, because so many of us have been squashed and pushed into the ghettos and into the cities and I wonder if there are deep-seated intrinsic ancestral parts of us that are always here saying, there is life for you there.
Yes.
And it feels that way for Addie, right? It's like, and she's gone through some trauma, and she's gone through some things, but there's this voice that's always like, you're in the right place. You're going to the right place. You can fly here. You can, I don't know. It's just beautiful.
No, well, thank you very much. But I hear you in terms of like land in the South. You know, my grandmother, she was from Georgia, and she brought the South to her to Pittsburgh, and she brought the oral storytelling tradition, which gave me the sense of, you know, down south, we have porches. So even though we had stepped up north, you know, I had that whole sense of this world because of her. But interestingly enough, you know, Jason, my family had land in South Carolina, and I I remember visiting one of my elders, and she held the land. But I also remember how my family couldn't keep the land, that the taxes or whatever was going on, and so many Black folks have lost land, and we know that hardship is still ongoing. So to me, like, to hear that you still have this land that your forefathers and foremothers left to you and kept it in the family, they were knowing that you needed this space, that you could say, this is mine, you know. That is so beautiful.
It's a wonderful thing. Let's talk about orienteering. So there's another big motif in this book that I love, and you use it right in the very beginning, but then you continue it all throughout this novel. And I think it's such a smart, it's a smart device, but it's also just a brilliant plot point, and it's map making.
Yes.
And I think, you know, I was with, you know, Christopher Myers, right?
Yes, Christopher.
Of course you do. I was with Chris years ago, and he had this obsession with Black people and map making and topography, but more so about like, how does one map their lives, right?
Yes.
Right, because you can map your life from South Carolina, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Washington State, right? Exactly, right? Like, how do we map our lives, and what does that mean for us? In this particular case for Addie, what does it mean for her? And also, not just the map making, but also her constant necessity to know where the exit is. I think it's such a, you know, these, you know, every now and then you read something and you're like, I wish I would have done this. I could have done this, you know.
You know, we could talk about, you know, bookmaking, and I do what I call this thing called dramatic fiction writing, and that I don't know where half these ideas come from or why they were there. And when Addie came up, you know, and I had her name Adago, you know, Nigerian, you know, daughter of an eagle. But map making, I can't read a map worth anything. I can't find directions. All the things that Addie can do, I can't do. And it was like, why am I writing about this? Because topography, cartography, all that stuff I had to learn. And that's what I also love about writing, how it forces your own special growth, and that whole sense of being able to see the whole. And there's actually a note that I had read where they talked about in school, kids will do math and they'll do reading, you know, literacy skills, but there actually is another ability in terms of being able to visualize spatial reasoning and 3D stuff. And that a lot of talented kids are being left out because the skill that they have isn't counted. There's no way that we say, oh, you can do this. Oh, hey, you got to go to college. And so Addie's one of those kids that she has a skill and a gift. And the tragedy would have been if she had not been in a place where she could use it, where she could really fulfill it and map the journey of her life. And so she was lucky to have BB, because we think of, you know, Nigeria and so many other places, but the geography there is spectacular. And that they have made a large commitment to their wilderness, their natural environment. And so BB then saying, I think you need this, the natural world, and then Addie mapping her way to it. But to me, the survival thing, I know growing up in the city, I always wanted to survive, or you knew where not to go, you know, and where to be safe. But it was from a human sort of direct, maybe physical threat, or else from emotional bullying and abuse. And I was always the shy kid. I think that if I had dealt with the trials of nature, that I would have been a stronger young woman, that I would have had, you know, more inner strength to sort of, you know, not feel so threatened by these other things. I think there's ways in which when you get comfortable with the world, the natural world, that you get comfortable in a deep-seated spiritual way with yourself, so that you stand taller, you are taller, and you're just more forceful. So to me, those things connected.
I agree. And I think you make that clear in the story in a way that I think is so nuanced. I think like, even thinking about map making, it's like, this is somebody who has dealt with, this young lady, Addie, has dealt with some very real things, and she's having a new experience. And I'm trying not to spoil it for all you folks who will read it, but she's dealt with some very real things. And I think, in an effort to also always be mapping out her escape plan, one has to acknowledge where one is. And yes. So it's right. And so it's interesting because she's also writing herself into the world, right? She's drawing, you have to orientate yourself, right? It's like, yes. This is where I am right now. And I found it to be so brilliant. And I think the same thing happens when they make it to the wilderness, right? And it's like, okay. And this is why I think that what you've done here is so smart, because I think that the story is working on so many layers, where it's like, this is a story about self-discovery. This is a story also, though, about understanding that you are a part of a whole thing, right? You're a part of an ecosystem.
Yes,
yes. And that you're right. And that you and these trees, or you and these plants, or these animals, right? Mm-hmm. All of this is all the same thing, right? Yes. Like, and so what your instinct might be to be afraid, but the truth is that you already possess the tools to navigate a space that seems foreign, but it's actually
yes, exactly. The core, yes. And exactly. That's what BB knew, and also the man who owns the Wilderness Adventures Camp, Leo, knows and wants to spread that word to all people. It's also a way to provide solace to all the young people who are worried about climate change. If you ask them, what's your main worry, the majority will say climate change. Mm-hmm. And so I also wanted an empowering story to say, yes, you can do this, that you can, but it starts with orienteering. You are the center of it all. You are, the thing that connects all of that together. But I like too what BB's grandmother BB says, to journey, you have to go there, or to journey, to be, anyway, I can't even say it, to be you, that idea that journey never stops. So in a fundamental way, the map, being on the airplane, making the hike, making the trek, understanding the journey and seeing it in its totality and its whole is important to seeing and realizing yourself. But I love to hear you talk about my book. I think I'm almost, I think I'm a little bit giddy, because we write our books and you never know how the world is going to take it. But I'm one of your great fans, and I'm but seriously, and to hear you talk about the book, you make me so happy. So thank you. I'll never forget this.
No, Jewell, honestly, I have a lot of respect for you as a writer, as a person. You've always been so kind to me. And I just respect that. I think that, there's a lot of us who do this work, but for me, I'm always looking for the person who is being, or at least I'm always drawn to the person who's being really intentional, right? Every word, thinking about the layers, are there layers here? Can the young person read this at 13 and read it again at 23 and it'll be a different book?
Yes.
Right? And it'll be a different book.
Yes. And that's what I admire too about your work, and that sense of layering. So and layering, which is significant and important thematically in terms of character development, and then also pacing and plot, and how you marry those two together. So when you talk about how you don't want to have, boring books, very often it's because people have left out elements of, the pacing, or left out elements of the layering. And so I'm trying to make a complete whole too, things to stimulate your mind, your heart, and yet don't you dare put that page down, because that page is calling you by your name. So turn it,
Exactly. Let me ask you this. Did you have to practice doing the whoa in order to write it into the book,
Addie is definitely not me, but I would also say Addie was inspired too by my daughter. My daughter became a Girl Scout, and I have a lot of respect for Girl Scouts in particular, because I saw my daughter go out learning how to start a fire, doing campfires and tenting and doing treks in Arizona, with those big backpacks and the heat. And she's a mama now, and I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. But I remember we were worried about a family who was in Miami and the hurricane was coming and all the cars were packed on the highway. And I remember my daughter saying just about a couple of years ago, you know what, Mama, I would just strap my baby to my back and we would hike out of there. And I was like, woo, yeah. So she got that from Girl Scouts, not from me. I'm teasing, but I was supposed to go to Hawaii and do a ropes course, where you climb on things and zip line and all that kind of stuff.
You do it in the book.
So Addie does it.
Addie does it.
Addie does it. So Addie really, I'm trying to mirror to all the different kinds of boys and girls that there are in the world, and to me, this was my love and my respect for those wilderness kids who have yet to discover maybe that they're wilderness kids. And so I was guided by Addie's spirit to make this beautiful young woman. If I had read her when I was a girl, my life might have been different. But it's about time we had children of color going out into nature and slaying it, and just being comfortable. Yes.
I agree. I think that these are the stories that I think are, it's just so important to tell these stories. One, to present opportunity and possibility, and two, because it's real, right? Like these kids exist in the world, right? Like there are wilderness kids who live in Seattle, right? Right? Like, all over the place.
Yes. And see, I just sort of showed, I have this thing that most of my life, I'm aware of how when I was east and then I went west. But then you can also say, but the kids who are west, they also then read about all the city stories. Yeah. So just in terms of diversity of stories, the Seattle kid might say, oh yeah, I know. In California, certainly, I know about the fires and all that kind of stuff. But then there are other stories that are for them. So the more stories we have about all the different kinds of ways of being in the world, the better off our world will be.
I agree. It turns out all the stories are wilderness stories to some extent.
Oh, well, that's true. Well, about that because you're talking about wild and the wildest as a metaphor. Mm-hmm. So I have feelings about that. But what are your feelings about that, Jason?
About the concept of wild as a metaphor?
Yeah.
I think that I think it's tricky, right? I think to some extent. I'm not, this is a good question that I haven't really thought about, but I often, but now that you're asking me, I think my question would be, what exactly constitutes something as wild, first of all, right? And is there a conflation between in this context, between the definitions of what is wild and what is free?
Yes. Right? And also, I think there's a sensibility that some people might hear wild and they think of it as a pejorative or that it's a negative, Right. And so to play with that and to say that you have a wildness, a wilderness spirit, and to say that it's normal, that maybe we will all be better off if we all felt that. And if you take it as a metaphor of freedom, like the wildness where you feel free, if we all felt free, then we don't feel the need to hurt anybody else. We don't need to feel the need to step on somebody else or discriminate, So it's sort of like, maybe that's like a new mantra, that to be wild is to be normal. It's to be of the world and also to feel loving and also to feel free. So I want to be a wild girl.
Oh, I'm going to keep this. This is a good one. I'm going to keep this with me. I think you're right. I think you're hitting on something there that there's something there that I really need to
I need to think too.
But I think there's something there, right? Like, because when we really think about that which is wild, it's like that which is natural, that which is free, that which is unoppressed and unhindered and uncaged, right? Like uncaged, right? Like
it can be celebratory in an interesting kind of way. Well, I'm gonna think about that too. And that's also ways in which, it's so nice to talk about a book with other writers or other readers, and it doesn't happen as I wish I could talk to every person who's ever read one of my books, because that's what makes our art so wonderful. It's an exchange that you bring out things that I hadn't thought of, in terms of the writing of it or just experiencing it and vice versa. And to me, those moments are precious and real, So I will get wild with you in Arizona anytime you want.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Yes, we're going to do it.
All right, we've got 6 questions. We're at the 30-minute mark, and I know we only have 15 more minutes. So I want to make sure there's Michelle. But Michelle, before you ask the first question, just in case I don't get a chance to say anything else, I want to make sure I ask my last question to Jewell. It's a question I ask everybody, Jewell, everybody that I've ever done one of these with. Okay, are you ready?
I don't know.
It's a good question. It'll make you think. It's a good question though. If you could look back on your life and go all the way back to your 10-year-old self, what would you thank 10-year-old Jewell for?
What would I thank 10-year-old Jewell for?
Yeah.
This is where Addie and I are alike. I would thank 10-year-old Jewell for surviving. The bulk of my childhood, I am unable to remember because things got so bad. Lots of loneliness, lots of abuse, lots of bad things happening. By the time I was 15, basically, I was in essence homeless and on my own, and had to go back to Pittsburgh to my grandmother, who was always that wellspring of love. So for me, I sometimes think that the reason why I'm called the middle grade is I'm writing the stories I'm wanting to experience me being middle grade again, because I don't remember it. So I'm writing stories I would like to read. I would have liked to read then, writing and by experiencing all these things that the kids are doing and surviving and thriving and all that kind of stuff, but having happiness and joy and self-confidence and resilience, I think that's a nod to literally a place in my life. I can't remember it. I don't want to remember. People want to go to therapy and they go, "Oh, you want to remember all of this?" And it's like, no, I don't.
You're like, I'm good.
But my writing is my catharsis, and it comes from that sense of a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old. They were so wonderful and so precious that I just want to hold up a glow of love that says, don't let anybody ever tell you you're not enough, because you are. And I think that's why I write.
I've asked that question to probably 30 people, and most of us are working in children's literature or working in adult literature, but writing about children, even in adult and quote unquote adult literature. And almost every one of us has a very similar sort of answer.
No. Oh my God.
Very interesting thing.
That, that is interesting.
It is.
I'm really saddened by that.
Yeah.
But it's also, it makes me feel less alone.
Exactly. That's why I told you, because and I've never asked it to somebody who felt that way, that didn't get emotional. It's an interesting question.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. It's a weird thing that connects us all. And I just wanted to share that with you,
Yes, it is. And also I think it gets to why we chose art, because art serves as catharsis. And art is about taking that which hurts and turning it into something beautiful, something that's, at least that you can give the gift of understanding to others while you're working through your own understanding of it, so, hey, if that's the price of art, that's something I'll gladly pay. And interestingly enough, I saw Paradise on Fire being a lot more joyous, particularly say in comparison to Ghost Boys. But I do remember that point with Ghost Boys where I thought, because I had to go through the catharsis, right? And all that Emmett Till and Trayvon and Tamir. And I remember thinking, I don't think I'm going to ever be able to write another book again. And I actually did not write for like 2.5 years. I just couldn't do it. And I didn't get the healing. The healing came later. But I thought to myself with that book, all that trying to make art of that pain, it was worth it in order for kids to find a way that they can navigate through it, So this wasn't, it's similar, but all my books are similar, but different. But I'm really glad I broke through that moment, and I'm writing more stories. Now, since the pandemic, I feel as though I'm aware of running out of time. And so I'm cutting back and putting more energy into writing more and more to leave what I hope might be something that, some kid will really need to read the book. Like kids really need to read your books, and the idea that they might last. And there's so many other books. We can go on Rita Williams.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the idea of leaving that as a footprint or a legacy for future generations, I think that's just really the highest honor. It's what your forefathers did in leaving the land for you. So maybe we're trying to leave in words that sort of spiritual call that says you have a place, you will always have a place in this world. You are this world.
Into that, Michelle, that's it. I don't have anything else.
I myself. Oh, no, thank you both for sharing. That was amazing. I know we do have some questions already in there, but I want to remind you viewers, if you haven't already asked a question, it's not too late. You can still click on Q&A at the bottom of the screen and add one there. You can also vote on your favorite questions, which will bump them up to the top of the list, and we'll go through as many as we have time for tonight. So let's see. So this question's from Tanisha. She says, hearing you two talk about books is everything. It's in all caps, by the way, everything. So what characters that you both have written do you think have the most in common? So I think that could be out of any of your books. You know,
this is easy for me. So you go. Okay. This is very easy for me. What? For me, this is an easy answer for me. I know my answer.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
It would be Patina and Addy, easily. If anyone has read the track series, the second book, Patina, she reminds me so much of Addie because her whole story.
I hadn't thought of that connection, but yes.
So much of Addie, right? This idea, the family stuff, and then like trying to build new friendships and build new relationships.
Yes.
Feeling like she's in a foreign place, like all of this stuff. And I was like, man, it was just. Yeah, that's
it. Okay. Well, for me, I'd have to say, I think in my own way, none of the characters are like me. You know, Lanisha, ninth word, is good at math. That wasn't me. Addie does charts, maps, and cartography. Not me. Deja and Towers Falling. Not me. But there's ways in which that's also a lie. I think there's pieces of me in all of them because of the empathetic connection that I make between my life, and their lives. But they're not my characters. I'll be asleep and then I'll wake up and like they're there. And when I was writing Sugar, I actually saw her. I was trying to figure out how to tell the story of Sugar. And I'm washing dishes and I looked out of the corner of my eye, and there was this little Black girl who had her hands on her hips, and she was saying, if I'm supposed to be free, then how come I can't play? And it was like, whoa, good question, So there's part of me in all of them, but they also are spirits that tap me. I wanted to be a children's writer my whole life, and I kept waiting for the call. So I wrote 7 books for adults, right? Because I was trying to become good enough to write for children. And I had an adult novel come out the day that Hurricane Katrina hit. And my publisher sent me to New Orleans 2 weeks after, as if bookstores were going to be open, right? But I got to see the devastation. And then I thought, what about the children? What about the animals, And then about a year later, I heard about another hurricane coming. And I literally woke up in a dream, and the whole first 2 pages of Ninth Ward was Lanisha's voice. They say I was born with a caul, a skin netting covering my face like a glove. It just poured straight out of me, and I never changed it.
All right. So we have a question from Amber. Going back to how you both were talking about layering your work. She goes, how do you go about layering your work, making it so rich? Do you think that comes about from the first draft, or does that come later?
Jason, go ahead and take it away.
I don't know. It's tricky. Jewell, did you ever train or study as a poet?
No, but I studied as an actress. But I know you were a poet, and that's I can't do poetry, Jason. So I think that's the hardest art form ever, because it's taking one word and having all the layers and nuances of meaning. But I do think that that's what I learned in drama school, that a word is never just a little word. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the answer for me. I think that anybody wants to learn layering, perhaps should study drama or should study poetry. I think that what we know or what we learn is that every single word may have to do double duty or triple duty, right? And I think when you learn that, you can understand how to write a story that's here, and those same words create another story that's here, yes. Right? And without you having to change those words, like for her to have to be making a map is something that is and to be trying to find the escape route all the time is something that exists on the A plot, right? It's in the A plot and in the B plot, right? It's both of them. It's happening. It's functioning on both layers, and I think that's sort of, I don't know. It's what I learned as a poet, and perhaps what Jewell learned in drama school.
I think, yeah, and also the idea that I don't use 50-cent words. I like to use how people talk. And it actually is, you will find the value and depth in those smaller words. Sometimes when you write the first draft, and I hate writing the first draft, I hate blank paper. Oh, good. I love revision. That's where the real thing of writing comes from. And one of the things I do in revision is when I'm reading the words, sometimes all of a sudden it'll go like, oh, this is also what it could mean, or oh, and that the words themselves, that once it comes out of me in terms of that passionate move, the words themselves become like a guide, a touchstone for saying, you haven't explored me enough and what this means. And then honoring what the words on the page tell me I should start thinking and feeling.
And also the other thing I do is I study entomology. So like I'm always interested in like the roots of these words, like where these words come from. And so like and like definitions of some of these words or the multiple definitions of some of these words. So like why would I name a child Patina? Well, if you know what a patina is, you know what I mean? If you know what it means for something to have a patina, to be worn down until it shines, right? Then you understand why Patina's life is the way Patina's life is, right? So like, but that has to do with just the extra step of saying like, what's the definition of this word? What's the root of this word? What's the sort of like, is it a Latin? Is it to come out of Latin? And what's that root? Is it a slang word? What part, like what, all of this stuff,
Yes. Jason, that's another thing we have in common. When I got to college and learned about the Oxford English Dictionary, and there's that dictionary where it's so small because they have so much information about each word, you need a magnifying glass in order to get all the, to me too, I love words. Yeah. Where did they come from? I found out the other day that girlhood originally meant both sexes. Can you believe that? Yeah, I mean, that it was originally girlhood was inclusive of boys, and interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
That was great. Diving into the layers there. Let's see, from Daisy. This question's for both of you. Do you have advice for city kids that may not have as much access to the outdoors or wilderness?
If you can, particularly there are state parks, there are national parks, and they are really, some of America's greatest treasures. And maybe then you can just go. You could, grab a sack lunch and ask your family, let's, grab a blanket and let's go to Sugarloaf Mountain, which I think is outside of DC, or let's go to Camelback Mountain, or let's go hiking or trail, or look for arboretums in your neighborhood. And also I would say going to the zoo. I love going to the zoo. But in general, the national parks and national parks, they do have a racial bias problem, that 95% of their folks that visit the national parks are going to be white. You can go to, so many great parks, and I've gone and I've been the only person who looks like me. And so right now the national parks, but they should have been doing it even more so, but they're doing it now. They have a big push to make racial equity, racial access part of their mission, to bring more kids, not just of color, but also kids from other kinds of destinations. Just bring all our kids. We own that land. You can visit it. One of the things that does concern me is that for some of the big national parks that they do cost, but many of your state parks are just going to be free.
Yeah.
You know, so say, Mama, let's have a picnic, or Papa, you know, let's go to the Arboretum. Or, you know, you could start with a box garden in your own backyard. I'm going to grow a flower. I'm going to grow some lettuce. And I tell you, you will feel transformed by just having a little square. So I hope you have 100 acres, a little square of dirt where you made something grow with your own hands.
Well, that's great. That kind of leads us into our next question, Jewell. We have a question. What was important to you to convey about race and class with this story, with Paradise on Fire?
How so many kids of color, and again, I was thinking of my East Coast bias, that all they live in nature deserts. So there's been all kinds of, you know, demonstrations that there are fewer trees in neighborhoods of color. So they're less protected from the heat. They don't have that sense of beauty, that their environment matters and means something. They don't have that landscape lawn. And I think that's an inequity, you know, and it leads to inequity that has mental health crises. If in Japan they know nature bathing, or, you know, can soothe your soul, you know, then why shouldn't every child have a park to play in, or have a tree to climb in their neighborhood? So I was really trying to get that message across, and how my life, or some people's lives, by not traveling. So you need to journey, And if everyone went journeying for their landscape, I think they would learn so much about themselves, so much about our human community, so much about the world. So if you haven't found your landscape, I urge every child, the world is just not only what you see in front of you. There is so much more.
Thanks, Jewell. This one goes to both of you, and it's pretty broad, but I don't know, I like it. Jason started off with why as his question. So this one is, how do you both feel about writing books? I mean, you've touched on, you know, different things that are important to you, but just generally from Kai Lanuza. How do you feel about writing books?
I think that it's a tremendous privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, this is the way I really believe. This is what I believe. I think that it's a tremendous privilege. I think that though I've worked very, very hard to be able to sort of experience life in this way, I also know that there are people who have worked harder, people who can write much better, people who have better ideas and stronger imaginations and better experiences. And so for me, and I know that because I know those people, and I know that they may never get their shot in the way that I have. And so the way that I feel about writing is that every day is a day that I get to wake up, and out of respect for those people and all the people who came before me, work to justify why I was given the shot.
Oh.
And that's the way I think. I'm very grateful for this life and for this work and for the opportunity to use my imagination to tell stories. I mean, honestly, I couldn't have, life is much better than I ever imagined. So that's what I think.
That's beautiful. I'll connect with you on the notion of the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
When I was coming up, you know, I didn't have any kids of color books written by authors of color that I could read. Didn't even have books really. And so I almost lost my profession, you know, and I remember I was a junior in college when I discovered a woman of color wrote a book. And it was like, what? And it just called to my soul, my heart. And then I've been in publishing for a really long time, you know, and going back when my second novel was about the Tulsa Race Massacre, you know, going back in the 1998s and the ways in which, you know, publishers or editors or people would say, well, I don't know about this, or we're expecting very little, or, well, this didn't sell, so maybe we won't do this next one. And all the ups and downs, you know, of just this profession. But a lot of times I just felt, you know, it's kind of a way of gatekeeping. And the world has opened up a little bit in publishing and a little bit across the world, but that needs to be exploded wide open. There are so many people, and I agree with Jason, that are so gifted. And if you go even further back to the the ancestors who were like picked from the shores of Africa, or came with the African diaspora, who never had a shot to show their glory. And if we could just commit ourselves to educating so that kids can, experience their glory, the world would be a better place. But I will tell you one super honest thing. Well, I've always been honest. Every time I finish a book, I say, I'm never going to write another one.
It's brutal.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
Every time.
Yes, every time it's hard. And different problems, right, Jason? Different issues. Oh my God.
Every time. You know what I tell myself to get myself, because I feel the same way, but then I remind myself, I come from a people who were never supposed to read and write.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So suck it up, Jewell. Suck it up.
I know. That's why I like my little sugar girl, because she goes from being enslaved to being free. And because of the plot, she ends up learning how to write her name for the first time. And she learns how to write it in Chinese, which is really, which is what I really love. But no, I did. Well, after Ghost Boys, where I was really just sad and just hurting, I just find, I take a few months off, and then it's like, I just got to get back. I mean, I really feel as though, boy, I got lucky to find out what I was really meant to do. And I would wish that gift for everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a funny question. I'm so grateful that both of you are authors, but we do have a question from a gay, again, sorry if I mispronounced, but she asked, if you were never an author, what would you want to be? So is there anything else that you've thought about or considered?
Yeah.
Well, I actually, when I was growing up, the images that I saw for how a Black person would be in the world was to be an actor, an entertainer, or a sports person. And I'm lousy at sports. So I actually went to Carnegie Mellon, home of Leslie Odom Jr. and a lot of other great people, and studied drama there. And one of the things that I think that I could have been was a playwright, I think, but I couldn't figure out, like the way that the great August Wilson and others did, how do you get people to invest all that money in you, and to make the play, though I have written the play. Now I think if I was, starting over again, I might be a screenwriter. But at the time, a poor kid, it's like, okay, I'm going to write a novel, and I get to be the set designer, the lighting designer. I get to play all the parts. I get to control the story and direct. And so it's like a perfect marriage. But I actually used to have a television show, and I also did dancing. So I did professional dancing and all that kind of stuff. Then we came upon, in terms of theater and the film business, the Black exploitation films. And the roles for women were not too good. So there was also ways in which, in terms of the narratives, through my storytelling, I could control against the sexism that was still exists in some of the industry.
Sure. For me, I think I would probably have been a furniture designer. Yeah, like I'm all about, like, but for the same reasons that I write books, like I think I just am interested in creating spaces that feel safe and beautiful for people. I think it's the same sort of mentality, you know what I mean? Yes. That's it. Like I would probably design furniture. I designed this thing I'm sitting on right now. It's like 15 feet long.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
your own personal couch there.
It is. It's literally. If you look, it's literally like.
That's cool.
And I love the artwork. It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
One of the things that you said, beauty, and I have become more and more cognizant of that. That's really what I want every day, beauty. And whether it be a flower or my view out my window or my home space, but one day when you don't want to write, I want to
come see me one of these days. Come see me.
Oh, I would love to see that. And for all of you who are doing so many other tasks, in the world, or might not be writers, it's like, it really is, we're craft people. And the craft can be in wood, it can be in ice, it can be in oil painting, it can be whatever that it's practicing a craft that is so marvelous. But woo, go Jason. Yes. I want Jason Reynolds original. No.
Yeah,
it might happen, Jewell. It might happen.
Let me know what I have to do. We're building a house, Jason. So we've been designing it and all that kind of stuff in the studio, and then the gardens, and that kind of stuff. And it's such a great expression of your beings. I am not very good with my hands, except when it comes to cooking. I can cook. Okay. And I used to give it a dance and all that kind of stuff, but expressing your soul with your hands too, I have so much respect for that. It's so important. So I'm also very much a fan of having our kids do trainees in, we have the wooden boats, a school for wooden boats out here where kids come and they learn how to make a wooden boat. How glorious.
That's amazing.
Anyway, yeah.
Beauty. Yes. We have a question from Katie G. So going back to the story and kind of getting into the nitty gritty in the process, Jewell, you talked a little bit about research, but did you have to do much research to write this story? And did anything surprise you, like the environment side of things or anything?
I did do a lot of research, but a lot of it because the pandemic wasn't so much. They were past memories of going out and hiking and hating camping with my husband. Addie loves camping, but I was basically in the pandemic room and I would think about it. But one of the things in terms of how the physicality of hiking and surviving and rappelling, work, all that kind of stuff, I did spend a lot of time talking to my husband, because there's one scene where the kids are at a river and they're trying to figure out, well, how do they get across it? Because a lot of city kids don't swim. Even though I took swimming lessons and all that kind of stuff, because I never learned to swim when I was younger, I'm still scared of the water. If I go snorkeling, my husband has to hold my hand and I still have a life jacket. I sound like such a big scaredy cat, but I sometimes feel very vulnerable in the water. So how would these kids who didn't know how to swim, how would they possibly be able to tell how deep the water is before they got into it? So puzzles like that, I would try to solve. And my husband was very, very helpful for how we could come up. What would you have in nature to do that? Because he actually did an outward bound course in wilderness and all that kind of stuff. I think that maybe that was why I married him. That's sort of like, well, you can do what I can't. So if it needs to be done, you help hike us out. And then I said, of course, make sure our kids can do that too. But Mama Bear, I'm still pulling myself along.
No, that's great. Let's see, Mary. I know, Jewell, you said you're not like Addie and the maps and the mazes and whatnot, but is there any other character from Paradise on Fire that you written that you feel represents you or you feel a connection with? And Jason, was there somebody in Paradise on Fire that you felt a connection with?
I definitely feel a connection with Addie. She's very special, but seeing, I see this lean, strong, clear-eyed, beautiful Black girl, who in her clothes, who can close her eyes and see the world as if she were an eagle. To me, that imagery is so, so powerful. And then having the ancestral connection back to her African grandmother. So I do feel that sense of the far seeingness, except I didn't get to that until I grew up and became, older, that I don't think a lot of times I was blind and I couldn't see. And now that I see how wonderful life can be, as it's been from Jason too, it's sort of like, I want kids, especially those who might be in need earlier, to have that sense of far seeing. You can see it in your mind and make it true.
Yeah, that's awesome. For me, I think it probably would be Jay. I love Jay. I love Jay. I love Leo too. I mean, Leo's who I probably want to be, right? With the kids that you and I are working for every day with these books. But I think there's something about Jay. I think it's because I really just love any male character who can just be a friend to a girl character. Yes. Like without all the stupid, like without all without the weird, just like a genuine, earnest, like, I just want to be your friend. I really love you. for
Yeah.
who you are. And I want to be around you because I like you as a friend without the ulterior motives. And that's always been the kind of kid, like the kind of kid I was. My friends would always be like, you don't want to date her? And I'm like, I just like to hang out with her. Like, I just like her as a person, as a human being, right? Not as like a romantic like endeavor, right? It's like, I like her as a person. And Jay, I think you do such a good job, even though his friends, they're all teasing, but he's kind of like, Addie and Jay are kind of like, yeah, but we just like each other. Like it's, and trust each other, and we trust each other, you know.
Yes. And thank you so much for saying that. I love Jay too. I love all my characters. You know, and in order to write well, you do need to love all your characters.
Gotta love them all, even the rough ones, you know.
Even the rough ones, and then we put them at risk in these stories that have conflict and tension, you know, and putting them at risk. Then they really show their character and their intrinsic goodness and why we love them so much.
That was amazing. I love Deshawn, by the way, too. But just wrapping things up, I see we're getting close to time. This has been absolutely amazing with both of you. I do have one more question. What are you working on lately? Is there any future project or
Jason has tons of projects.
What are you working on, Jewell?
No. Well, I'm slow. I'm working on a book. It's a retelling of a classic that I'm not at liberty to be able to tell you what it is just right now, you know, but I'm almost done. And I think it's pretty cool and pretty fun. So people might feel surprised. And then I'm doing research for another book that I've always wanted to do, a book trying to handle slavery in a way that worked, you know, in a way that. So anyway, I'm just working on a story about that, but that's still in the dreaming stage and the you know, reading stage. But I think it comes from that sense that it's like every time when I was going to school and my kids who went to school and they both read the same book by the same Black author, you know, even though they were like 4 years apart, you know, like the idea that anytime those slavery came up, how the kids of color in some contexts would be like, well, you must know everything or whatever, you know,
right.
And that there becomes a shame and a shyness and just sort of like a trauma attached to it, you know, and of course it should be. But it's also a history that maybe more kids other than kids of color definitely need to know. And maybe I could do something in that space. I don't know. That's one of the things about writing books too. Every book I start, I don't know that if I can write it. It's just the trying of it that makes it fun, you know? So if you never see the book, that means Jewell failed.
I always think if it doesn't scare you, what's the point?
Exactly. Why write in your comfort zone? Weird. You know, but it's like wrestling the chaos, and intellectually and spiritually, that means so much fun for me. It's like, I don't think I can do this. Whoa, I got to do this. I don't think I can do it. It's gonna be fun trying to see if you can do it. And so that's the book that's deep inside me that might come out. So it might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. But thank you for asking. But Jason, talk about I saw 2 books that are coming out within like a month of each other. And then what else are you working on?
There's a bunch of stuff. I mean, I have Stump Boy in the Meantime, comes out in November. It was supposed to come out early November, but I think it's been pushed back because of all the delivery holdups. So I think the end of November, Stump Boy in the Meantime, which I'm very excited about, that I worked with Raoul III, the genius Raoul III on, and it's beautiful, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited about that. And then I have Ain't Burned All the Bright comes out right after that with my buddy Jason Griffin, which is a piece of art that we created, which is cool. And then next year I also have an adult novel coming out called This Mouthless God. So I'm working.
All right. Yeah.
He's working hard.
You see this face, Jewell? This is the face of a tired man. I'm like,
I know. Well, thank you so much for all that you do. And I know you're going to fill up all the shelves in politics and prose, you know, that you were making such a canon
I'm a hometown boy, though. I'm a hometown boy. They gotta show me it's a little bit of favoritism. A little bit of favoritism.
Absolutely. And writing from the different age groups, I think is wonderful. The different genres, that's wonderful. Stamp, was absolutely brilliant. Everything that you do is brilliant and infused with your own special soul. So I think, to me, they say, okay, so when I'm not writing, I'm going to read your books.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for being here for me tonight, Jason. Thank you, Politics and Prose and audience. This has been really such a joy. And it's like, I don't know, we are like, we are the generations in a way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and it's just, it thrills me whenever I see Jason and some of our other writers. It just thrills me. Thrills me. You got through the gate and you're opening it up for others. It just warms my heart. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you both for doing this. Thank you, Jewell. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, viewers, for joining us tonight virtually and for all your questions. We do want to remind you that you can still click the link in the chat to purchase The Amazing Paradise on Fire. And you can also check out our website, because these folks have written many, many amazing books, and you can definitely get more there. As an independent bookstore, we very much appreciate the support. So be sure to check out our website for updated event listings, and you can follow our children and teen department on social media under @kidsandprose. And that about wraps up our time tonight. So we hope you enjoyed hearing from these amazing authors, and we hope you have an excellent night.
Love you, Michelle. Good night, Jason. Do a power nap.
I'm going to do it now, Jewell. Talk soon.
Love you. Bye-bye.